Good evening and good morning, those in Korea or in Asia. So I'm Gi-Shin. I'm director of Schoenstein Asia Pacific Research Center, also director of Korea program here at Stanford. So this is our last colloquium for Korea program this quarter. And I'm very happy to have two speakers for this panel about Korea election that just happened 2 days ago in Korea, right? Okay, so some of you may be watching the election. I think there are a few very important features from this election. The first one, it was highly contested. The margin was less than 1%. It's a little over 200,000 votes. It's really close in the end. The second one, Mr. Eunjung won the election, and he is not really conventional political politicians. As you know, he was career prosecutor, and he entered politics only last summer. And moreover, he was appointed to Prosecutor General by President Moon Jae-in, and then Mr. Yoon ran as a candidate of the opposition party. And third, in the democratic era, there has been a change of power every 10 years, but this time only after 5 years. And number four, during election, we saw anti-feminism and also anti-Chinese sentiment. I think that's quite unusual for Korean election this time. And finally, the campaign has been quite negative, or actually very negative. And spouse of neither candidate rejoined the campaign. I thought that's also very unusual. Okay, so today we are going to analyze election and then assess what is going to happen or what can expect from the new government. So we have two experts joining us from Korea. First, Professor Jae-ho Yeom. He is now Emeritus Professor of Policy Studies at Korea University. And he served as the 19th president of Korea University. So he has so many experience and positions. He also very actively involved in advising Korean government on foreign policy and other area. And actually, he also moderated presidential debates on TV in the past. And last but not least, he also our alum. So he has Ph.D. In political science from Stanford University. So very happy to have you, President Jae-ho Yeom. And then our second speaker, Professor Eunjung, who's teaching international studies at Gwangju National University. He also serves as vice president for international affairs at the university. And she also engaged in a lot of policy advising for Korean government, including Ministry of Unification. She had a bachelor degree from University of Tokyo in Japan, and also a PhD from Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Okay, so as usual, each speaker will make opening remarks for about 10 minutes, and then I'll lead a conversation with a panelist based on their remarks and also questions from the audience. So please submit your Q&A, your question via Q&A box. Okay, so without further ado, let me turn to Professor Im first, who will be analyzing the election. Dr. Lim?
Again, thank you. Thank you for having me. First, let me share my own slides first, and then with the slides, I'm gonna talk. Hold on a second. Yes. Can you see the whole? I think now you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Again, thank you very much for kind introduction, Professor Shin. This is my great honor to have a discussion with the two distinguished scholars, Professor Shin Gi-wook and President Jae-ho. And it is my great pleasure to meet other academic friends there at Stanford. Again, the topic of the seminar is post-election analysis and the reflections. So for the first half of my talk, I will share my own observation about the election. And then after that, I'd like to point out some critical challenges the new president will meet very, very soon. So this is my kind of, how would you say, a quick summary of the observation. First and foremost, as Professor Shin already mentioned, the margin was so close, the closest ever in the post-democratization history, which was actually pretty much different from what was expected because pre-election polls were in general much more positive, supportive for Yoon. So when that is why when the exit polls were revealed, both parties seemed to have very complex feeling. But anyhow, Yoon won. But again, the margin is just less than 250,000 votes, which means again almost the other half of the whole electorates or whole population are not supportive for Yoon or even unhappy with the result. So having said that, I will list up 4 key factors that contributed to the result. Of course, number one, unifying candidacy with Mr. An Chol-soo, another Stanford fellow. Well, the effects, however, I'll say were kind of mixed. Of course, it created positive effects, but at the same time, there were some backlashes too. So it's hard to say An 100% positively contributed to the result. But in general, I'll say, he certainly contributed to the result. And second, regions. I think many of you are already pretty much familiar with the regional politics here in Korea. East provinces like Gangwon province or Gyeongsang province, 2 Gyeongsang provinces tend to prefer the Conservative Party. One big reason for that is, security concerns, whereas Jeolla provinces, where Kim Dae-jung was from, President Kim Dae-jung was from, they tend to be more supportive for President Moon Jae-in's approach for peace in the Korean Peninsula. So the key player this time was, I would say, of course, Chungcheong province, where my university is located. This region has been known as a so-called swing state or swing province or casting vote. So this time, obviously, Chungcheong provinces did contribute, but the margin was not that big either, just 6-7% different. And the third factor is generation. This time, people who are in their 40 or in the 50 were the most supportive group for the current government and for for Lee Jae-myung, which indicates their perception, I think, perceptions or interpretations about the so-called Candle Revolution and the Park's impeachment 5 years ago. Senior citizens were much more conservative or even against the current government and the Minju Party. And 2 main reasons can be raised, I think. One is economic issues and 2 is security concerns. And then gender, that's the kind of the 4th factor I'd like to highlight. As Professor Shin already mentioned, the kind of, feminism versus like anti-feminism was there. And if you see the results, for example, the second, this is I'm sorry, I didn't translate everything, but what the left graph shows you, left figure shows you the regional results, and the right bar graph shows you the generational and the result by gender. But if you see the 20s and 30s, more female voters voted for Lee Jae-myung, and more male voters voted for the Yoon. So obviously the gender was another like determining factor here. So to make long story short, I think all these results reveal the Korean electorates showed kind of strong identity politics tendency. So, Dr. Francis Fukuyama is also there again at Stanford, and he is my second actually Ph.D. advisor, and his recent book, Identity, was tremendously inspirational for me too. And I thought like, this is the case for this current, the latest 2022 presidential election here in Korea too. It was pretty much reminiscent of 2016 US election to me. And having said that, now let me move on to the challenges the new president will meet. Domestically speaking, of course, the divided society by different identity politics is really the concern, which is also related to the relations with the National Assembly too. And in the National Assembly, the Conservative Party is not the majority. They have, this time, we did have the by-election as well, and they added 4 more seats. So now they're gonna have 110 seats in the National Assembly, whereas the Minju Party, the current ruling party, the Minju Party has 172, which is huge. So the gap is large. So that is one of the reasons why I think Yoon wants to speed up merging with the An's party. But the thing is, An's party, they only have like 3 seats in the assembly. So the gap will remain pretty large until the next general election. So how to cooperate with the assembly is really the biggest challenge to Yoon. And the local election is coming, scheduled on June 1st, but the 2 more years again are left until the general election for the assembly. And economically speaking, stagflation situation, of course, South Korea is not the only one who is suffering from this long, prolonged pandemic. But anyhow, stagflation is a tricky problem, as we all learned from our macroeconomics class. So, how to solve this is absolutely a huge challenge. And internationally, of course, the aging society, local extinction, we call this in Korean 지방 소멸. So these two kind of social problems are adding more and more financial burdens to the to the government. And there are some strong requests for the Korean values too. I personally do think the Koreans really care about the justice and fair competition. So how to restore those Korean value while still tackling the stagflation. This is really a huge challenge for the new government. And in the international affair, of course, many other issues are there. Volatile situations in Europe created some negative spillover effects already, I think, here in this region too. Arms race can be accelerated by uncertainty and fluidity in international affair. And the changes in international order or transition in international order from unipolarity to the multipolarity is another challenge. Global value chain restructuring, fourth industrial revolution, climate crisis, these kind of major how would you say, new trend absolutely are the challenges for the new governments, and the chilled relations with the North and the Japan. How to restore partnership with the Japan is another big challenge. So this is my kind of I would just say my last slide, and I think for the new government, it will be extremely difficult to make a good balance between competing or even conflicting interest and value. So Korea, has been a major trader in the international economy and pursues a 중견국, more than 중견국, more than just middle power. Now Korea pursues a network. In the network, they pursue a hub like a state. It's hard to actually translate in English, so I'd love to actually hear Professor Shin's observations about the term too. But anyhow, we have many different issues there, and how to make a good balance between those conflicting, competing value and interest will be the challenge for the new government. So it's very difficult time. I hope I can hear more wisdom from my American academic friends too. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Im, for a very concise, excellent presentation. And we have a lot of things to talk about. But before that, let me turn to President Jae-ho for his insights and his thoughts. Dr. Yeom.
Okay, thank you. It is my pleasure and honor to just participate in this webinar organized by the Stanford University, and I especially thankful, Professor Shin to organize this kind of webinar. I like to share my ideas and some kind of analysis with you, with the Stanford colleagues, but a little bit more just a wide view or the macro view of the election or Korean politics from now on. The first one, I just summarize the issues in the 20th presidential election in Korea. The main issues are the judgment of incompetence and hypocrisy of Moon's government. Moon's government, President Moon, announced that in his inauguration address, and the Korean people will see the new nation and new country never experienced. So we are expecting some kind of high dream of the Korean future, but in the process of his regime or his rule, and a lot of problems and some kind of incompetency and hypocrisy is a very critical issue. So the many voters has strong just a sentiment to judge this kind of the Moon's administration. And also another issue is a sudden rise of real estate price last year and tax increase, and also the improper policy measures for COVID-19. And it is highly politicized, many people believe, highly politicized in various occasions. For example, just before the presidential election, they just relieved and lift up some kind of regulations of the vaccine pass in restaurant or something like that. So there are many people are just a positive result of the COVID-19. So they couldn't just participate in the election. That is another serious problem. And also, for example, it may be a conspiracy, but anyway, you know that the invalid vote is more than 300,000 ballot. So it is more than the just like a margin between Yoon and Lee's 240,000 margin, something like that. And also appeasement policy for North Korea and China, especially anti-China movement. You mentioned that Professor Shin mentioned that feminism issues and gender issues, and also the anti-China issues. It is very complicated one. So it is just around about the younger, just the voters. For my daughter's case, very young, and in the college students, her friends. Has a very strong anti-Chinese sentiment, especially the after the Olympic Games. They have very strong sentiments. So they're against the Democratic Party and Moon's government. The only reason, and they don't like President-elect Yoon, but they just don't like more the Democratic Party or the Moon's government because of the Chinese stance. And you know that the unlikable candidates, both of them, and Professor Chen already mentioned, and the failure of Moon's government and Democratic Party, and the party leader mentioned that they could run more than 20 years, but they just has a very strong conviction to just rule the Korean society for more than 20 years. But there are a lot of problems appeared. The inconsistency, we just call narrow number, and the self-righteousness. It is they are the only right people, and the old evils should be just abolished, and that is a very strong stance. But finally, it turns out to be they are the same people, just like the traditional just the conservative parties, and we just call it the 5A6. That is some kind of a democratic movement. The students now become 50s, but they only searching for some kind of interest, and they're just the Korean people believe the political interest groups. So it is another problem, and also they are very, very hastiness is another issue. So they can they believe that they can solve the problem in a day, but so that is a reason why they neglect the due processes and the political maneuvering. And especially another issues are, it may be related to the democratic student movement leaders. They believe that they are not the experts and professional in the various issues, so they just disregard the expert and professional. They just disregard the administrative leaders and elites, and so that is kind of a very strong evidence is the support system, and every part, even the ambassadors and in the foreign relations, and also the in the around the 7 or 8 peoples of the just a National Assembly member become just a minister in the administration. There is no check and balance between administration and the legislative bodies, and even we are the presidential system. It is a very serious problems of the just like shaking the traditional democratic system. And now the Yoon's government task is some kind of integration of divided people, highly segregated divided people, and also rebuild the fairness and justice. And Moon's administration, they believe their work they're doing is the fair and justice, but ordinary Korean people don't believe, that is fairness and justice. And also handle with party politics, especially the People Power Party. It is a highly conventional politicians, and how to handle this problem as a political novice. And another one is that consolidation of the People's Party and Chol-soo, and it is another mission he should solve. And another one is that the sweet temptation of tax increase. And just last year alone, tax increase, we achieved the 61 trillion won, around $60 billion in a year. So even though they try to just a tax decrease in Yoon's government, but still they need some money to solve a lot of problems. For example, the COVID-19 issues, and also some kind of salary increase for the armies or something like that. So a lot of just a government in need of money and budget. So the tax increase is another serious problem. And also reorganized foreign relations and security is another one, and especially the close to US, and that just against China or Russia and that kind of things are another issue. And the confrontation with the political opposition, it means that the opposition party, I mean that the Democratic Party already organized, just announced that it is some kind of emergency situation. We're going to organize and fight against the Yoon's government. So after the COVID-19, during the COVID-19, the mass demonstration is a little bit opposed, and because it is banned by the government. But from now on, now the just like candlelight rallies can be possible in the some kind of the city in Seoul, and it is a very serious problem, just like Lee Myung-bak administration confronted at the outset. Two scenarios. One is that if we know that Mr. Yoon is very candid and outspoken or straightforward, so he just admit that, just like President Chun Doo-hwan, he admired Chun Doo-hwan in a sense and said that, oh, he did a good job in politics. So if he just become a humble leader and then delegate the authority, and especially for expert in science and economics or something like that, for Mr. An Chol-soo, or he just support the expert government and appoint the good just the ministers or that kind of thing. It is a good scenario. But another one is that as a political novice, and he is captured presidency, and we believe that President Moon is also captured by some kind of NGOs or some kind of political groups, so he cannot do anything. Then it is a very serious problems for the Korean politics. And last one is that I strongly just argue that the end of 1987 democratic regime and new politics is necessary. And we feel that the military regime just lasted very long, but it is only 25 years. But after 1987, we've already just experienced 35 years of the democratic regime. But it is highly democratic, a little bit authoritarian regime, in a sense. Very, it is some kind of, not a proper word, but anyway, everything is possible because I am elected. So you should be just shut your mouth because I'm elected. It is every field, election is some kind of right way, but it is possible for the future Korean politics. So massive political reform is necessary. And then the constitutional amendment may be another issue that we should solve. So the last part, I just mentioned that the long-term political vision for conservatives. The first one is that the coalition with center parties and political groups is necessary for the Yoon's government. If he just run the government along with the various in the central areas of the people or expert, then it can be the long-term vision for conservatives, especially very similar to the Japanese LDP's long-time ruling possibility, because you know that in the 1960s, the student movements in Japan is very fierce. And then the Democratic Party ran several times in the during the 1980s and 90s, but they are incompetent, and everybody believes that they are incompetent, even though they don't like LDP, but still support the LDP. And the LDP is just a coalition with the Komeito or something like that. So this kind of strategy the Conservative Party and the Yoon's government takes, and there will be some kind of long-term precaution. And also the changes of political landscape and demography, it is a very you may see this kind of thing is very interesting thing. For example, sorry about the English translation, and the 20s, they support conservative parties, the Yoon Suk-yeol, and the 60s, of course, they supported the conservative parties. Only the 40s and 50s, they are Democratic Party supporters. But here you can see that because of demographic change, 20s and the 60s, over 60s, the numbers are increasing very rapidly compared to the 40s and 50s. So if it lasted, it will last for, after 10 years or 20 years, more conservative, just a trend and political landscape will increase. So the Yoon's government are very, very clever and smart, and they run the government very well, then there's some possibility of the long-term ruling from now on. So another one is that the Democratic parties, and they are very strong for the last 20 or 30 years. The grassroots NGOs and organizations for the liberal parties or the Democratic parties are very strong. For example, the School Teachers Association and the labor parties, and also the very small minor NGOs in Seoul metropolitan cities. You know that more than 200 just the NGOs are supported by the Seoul metropolitan budget. So this kind of thing. And also the last one is that the conservative party leaders, they believe that, oh, we are right, and we just follow the due process. And most of them, the lawyers and some kind of legal process is very strong. But in Korean, still, we need to appeal to the emotion politics. So if President Yoon behaves just like a conqueror, and it will be a serious damage for his government. So it is a very good, very lucky just the outcome of the election result, because of very small margin of the victory. So he should be humble, and he should be cooperate with the opposition parties. And he also mentioned that, oh, this is politics, and from now on, the bigger opposition party and the smaller ruling party, and we will just make the new politics or something that he announced this yesterday. So this kind of appeal to emotion politics is more important for his future successful government. Thank you very much. This is my idea.
Okay, thank you, President Yeom. Okay, so you're.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay. So so we have a lot of issues to discuss. So let's try to look at one by one. Okay, let me start with Moon Jae-in's policy. Dr. Yeom, you indicate a lot of problems with his government. And I've been also speaking out about backsliding of Korean democracy over the years. I think for the, let's say, Western audience, there's a little puzzle to understand, because despite so many problems that we talk about, still his approval rating is around 40%, which is very unusual for outgoing presidents in Korea. And then ruling party could have won this election because the margin is so thin. So it could go the other way around. So I think for maybe outside observers, this is a little puzzle. How do you understand? On the one hand, it looks like there's a lot of problems, and then he seems to be quite incompetent. At the same time, still maintaining a high rating, and then his party could have won this election. So can you enlighten us how to understand this seemingly contradictory situation? Yeah, to both of you.
Yeah. First of all, yeah, it is a very strange or puzzle, especially just at my age and our just surrounding friends, and they dislike Moon Jae-in, but the supporting rate is still very high, the highest among the former president. But I think that is related to some kind of emotion, politics, and he is a little bit reserved and very calm, and he doesn't show some kind of unlike other president, and also that is his style is one thing, and the second one is that very strong. I'm often very surprised to hear that or see that many Korean people still has a very strong disbelief against the conservative parties and traditional conservative parties, the People's Power Party or something like that. So that is another one. And the third one is that this kind of a very little margin of the victory of the Yoon or Conservative Party, it is related to the very strong, as I mentioned before, the organizational power. And I mean the assembly members and also in the local areas, very well organized for the Democratic parties rather than the People Power Party, because they have a very strong supporters and well organized compared to the conservative parties. Conservative party supporters are not organized people, just like regular, ordinary people, but in the Democratic Party's way, they are very well organized. So it is a very unique situation compared to Japan or other countries. In Korea, and we have to analyze more deeply, but my understanding or my impression is that this kind of three issues are well related. For example, my students around 40 years or 50 years, that they still believe President Moon is right and the Democratic Party is right. Even though any evidences of Lee Jae-myung and scandals and anything, they don't believe it, because it is because of the conservative newspapers and conservative, just like fake news or something like that. So it is very strange, but it is true.
Dr. Im, anything to add?
Oh yeah, sure.
Or disagree?
Well, I partially agree with President Yeom's that observation. Number one, again, President Moon has a very, very collectively loyal supporter group. So that's clearly, I think that's one big factor. Whereas Minju Party, how loyal people are, it's another issue. It's related to, of course, class identity too. For example, like irregular workers or people who don't have houses, they have more like a strong loyal support for the Minju Party, but many others don't have kind of how would you say, support for the Minju Party. And number two is I'm sorry to say this, but I think they picked wrong candidate, I think, because Lee Jae-myung, in somewhat senses I do understand, because whole Korean society has been too frustrated with the so-called political elites, establishment. So that is why probably the leader groups or the party member, they chose a kind of more fresh politician who already showed his capacity as a governor or a city mayor, but he did have many issues. So I don't think a whole group who supported President Moon or Minju Party, or not all of them actually supported the Lee Jae-myung this time. So those two things I think I want to share.
Okay, so following up your remark on Lee Jae-myung, actually this is a question from the audience. I think some people like in the United States, they say that Lee Jae-myung and Yoon Suk-yeol, okay, they are Korean version of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, and because one is leftist, populism, the other one represents rightist, populism. I mean, do you think that's a fair characterization or not? I think that's something actually I heard quite a bit in this country by some people kind of following Korean politics. So any comment on that question?
May I?
Sure, yeah, please.
Well, as I wrote in my PowerPoint slides, to me, it was more like a reminiscent of the Hillary versus Trump. But before we started the seminar, Professor Shin, you shared your own view. This was more reminiscent for you of the Biden versus Trump, and the audience, one of the audience, you said like this was more like a reminiscent of Sanders versus Trump. Well, I think Lee Jae-myung himself, it does have all of this. I'm sorry to say like this way, because Sanders, of course, he showed some very left populism like policy suggestions, but at the same time, he was also how would you say, he showed many so kind of doubtful. There were so many doubtful situations about how corrupted he is. Whether or not it's fact or whether or not it's illegal. Regardless of all the things. Anyhow, there were so many doubtful things. So that's another, which is pretty much how just a reminiscent of Hillary situation. And then the Trump and the Biden, if some of you are agree with that idea, I'll say, as Professor Shin already talked with me, before the seminar started, again, it was more about, anything but, right? Anything but the current ruling party. So I think this time, the Minju Party as candidate, the Lee Jae-myung did have all of these aspects.
What about Yoon Suk-yeol?
Yeah. Kind of similarity between Yoon and Trump. I'll say, he's a novice, as President Yeom already mentioned. He's totally out of the circle, right? So-called Washington or Yeouido circle in by Korean terms. So that's one big, I think, similarity between the two.
Dr. Yeom, do you have any comment?
Yeah, but well, it seems to me that, in a leftist, just the interpretation, that Sanders is similar to Lee Jae-myung, is similar to Sanders, but I don't feel that kind of way, because Lee Jae-myung is a very practical person. He's not a leftist. He is a populist, and he changed every time his ideas and his policies, and so he's more like Trump style. It's more like Trump rather than Sanders. And we cannot believe or trust him as a sincere person. He changed every time. And so as a populist, but sometimes he just pick up the leftist ideas because it appeals to the voters more, and then changed very rapidly as some kind of pro-entrepreneurs and pro-industry and pro-businesses very easily. So he's a practical person. So I don't think that. And also, the Yoon Suk-yeol is not like Trump, and he is a rather not that kind of a practical people, but more some kind of the legal bind or some kind of, he tried to stick to his own ideas, but it is not politically well trained and that kind of ideas. So it is immature. That is a problem, I think.
Okay, and then building on I think your remarks and also taking a couple of questions from the audience. Actually, we have a lot of questions from the audience. One about looking at both parties in the aftermath of this election. I know the leadership of Democratic Party, they resigned, right? And whether there will be any power struggle within the party, because Dr. Im, you mentioned Moon loyalist, right? Very strong. And the former head of party Song Yeong-gil was not really mainstream, and Lee Jae-myung has very weak base in the party. So for the Democratic Party, I mean, do you expect that maybe mainstream pro-Moon faction will try to come back to take over the party, and then maybe fight with Yoon Suk-yeol? Okay, that's one possible scenario. And for the PPP, okay, and same thing in a sense, because Yoon Suk-yeol doesn't have any strong base in the party, and then he led coalition of anti-Moon or anti-Democratic Party, right? Forces, and then now he has to figure out what to do with An Cheol-soo or Lee Jun-suk and other people. So I mean, can you expect a similar power struggle within PPP in the coming months? So if you can maybe make some comments on each one, that will be useful. Okay, either of you.
Oh, well, both parties, I think they both need a creative destruction, I think. Well, all this establishment, I will say, they definitely need to understand how frustrated Korean people have been about the so-called political elites, and the Minju Party, of course, the 586, so-called Eunjung generation. I'm sympathetic with them. I think many Korean people are sympathetic with them, but probably people will say, we're done with you guys. I mean, I think compensated you, we chose you, and we gave you so many chances. So what else do you need? So I think many Korean people are, feel like that way about the so-called mainstream of the Minju Party. Conservative Party, they already got that kind of backlash from the Korean public when the President Park Geun-hye was impeached. But the thing was, again, the PPP, they have been so bad with dealing with the aftermath of the impeachment. They were so fragmented, all the leaders group. So, I will expect the new president, again, the president-elect Yoon, will be a very different leader. I mean, he I don't know, this is it is not even academic observation. He has been, as President Yeom already mentioned, he has been so consistent in a good term, or in a bad term, kind of stubborn. So, he might be pretty different from the, his how would you say, 선배들. I don't know, but I would say, both parties, they definitely need to reform internally. Otherwise, people will keep just, feeling frustrated with the politics.
President Yeom?
Yeah. I think that this is the right time for Korean politics. I mean that both candidates, Lee Jae-myung and Yoon Suk-yeol, they are the party members. And so this is the right time, because Korean people dislike the traditional party leaders and traditional party politicians. So this is the right time just to reform political parties in both parties. And also, Lee Jae-myung got the power from now on, and he can just control the party in a sense, because his stance after the election, and he just gave a speech, and he simply mentioned that all the problems are my fault or something like that, and also he just accepted it, and very emotionally just appealing to the voters and the party members or something like that. So someone told me yesterday, oh, he started another election, next year presidential election, he already started now. And so he has a very smart person, and he's going to change the some kind of democratic parties from now on, because as I mentioned before, if Yoon's government become very successful, then there will be a very long-term ruling of the conservative parties, and the democratic or leftist groups will be collapsed very, very easily. So they have to be more smart and clever compared to the, assembly members in the Democratic parties are very, very outspoken and very rude, and sometimes their behavior is not like likable behavior. So there's some kind of both parties, PPP and also Democratic parties, will change very rapidly. Because every voters understand the present party is not acceptable, so they're going to change it. Even Yoon Suk-yeol, but I'm a little bit afraid of this kind of a projection, because President Lee Myung-bak and the President Park Geun-hye, both of them are elected as a president, but they dislike political parties and politicians, and they don't talk with even their ruling party members or something like that. So it is a very serious problem. If the just like a Yoon Suk-yeol follows that kind of way, it is a disastrous way. But unlike that kind of posture, but reform more, just a moderate reform or some kind of just a political reforms for the future, then it will be a very good merits for a new president, I think.
Okay, there are several questions on this topic, but about this gender politics. I was very alarmed that the opposition was really provoking anti-feminism to get male votes, and I'm glad that it didn't work out. Eventually it backfired, and then young female supported Democratic Party. And lately there's article by AFP of France. I gave interview as well, and so the title of the article was "Anti-Feminist Political Novice Yoon Became President." So in other words, they are concerned that he might be seen as anti-feminist. This is a really bad image for any new Korean president. But in a global era, if you're seen as anti-feminist, I don't know how he can really talk to global leaders, to be honest. So I don't know, maybe they miscalculate that it might work as a campaign strategy, but then this image already quite bad. So what should we expect? Do you think he'll change? How he gonna recover from this bad image of being anti-feminist?
Well, I think that it is not Yoon's idea, but it is Lee Jun-suk's strategy. And finally, Yoon mentioned that he's a feminist or something like that. So, but You know that the March 8th is the Women's Day. So that is just one day before the election. So it just some kind of agitates some kind of feminist groups and very strong, powerful leaders in feminists. And she just announced that, oh, it is a very serious problem. And the anti-Yoon, the movement increased very rapidly. So if someone jokingly said that if the election is one day after or 2 days after, then the result will be changed because of the around the 88% or 7% of the some kind of margins. The Yoon was won before the election, but suddenly it is a very small margin. So it is I don't know whether it is a Democratic Party's strategy or some kind of planned one. But anyway, this is some kind of very serious issue. But the feminist issue is a kind of Eunjung Seok, because he's MZ representatives of the MZ generation. And then MZ generations, especially male just the voters, their feeling and emotion is very, very strong. That is true. So it is not a matter of the anti-feminist issues, but between the gender issues in the younger generation. So we have to just solve this problem from now on. Yeah.
Dr. Im.
Well, the reason why I said that, I did see identity politics this time, if you read Francis Fukuyama's That Identity, he highlighted all this resentment from the invisible man. So those were like white, again, the working class who live in the more less urban areas. Those people are here too. I think, and they include the males who went to the military by calling from the country, from the state, but still they have to compete pretty seriously in the job market, and they don't have any advantage, So they have very kind of Eun in mind. So I think they really collectively behaved at this time. Like the Trump time. So what I'm trying to say is all this gender-related things or kind of sign of again, all this division by identity. And at the same time, it was also, I think, a kind of made up images about the Yoons too, as just, President Yeom mentioned, or another like audience asked about astrology issue or shamanism, all those things. I think that those were too exaggerated, I think. So, well, we'll see. Of course, Yoon, his career grew up in the prosecutor's office. We all know Korean prosecutors are a super masculine group, the most probably masculine group in the society. So he might have that kind of habit, habits too. But I want to remain as hopeful as much as I can. Yes.
Also,
I'd like to add one thing. And well, we are young as a student, and we just revert against the totalitarian and authoritarian regime. But young males in these days, they feel that kind of way, because all the leaders and the powerful people in the household, in the family, mother is very strong. And also in the elementary school, more than 90% of the teachers are female. And they are strongly controlled. And also the high school ages, and also the college ages, and also in the job market, females students are much competent compared to male. But male, they should go to the military services, so they are some kind of then the Democratic Party supported that kind of feminist ideas, or the female or something like that. So they have some kind of very, very strong emotion at the moment, it is a real issues in these days for the young male generation in these days.
There's a very interesting question from the audience. Just like, President Yeom, like your daughter, young female. Okay, so they might like Mr. Yoon for his tough stance against China, like an anti-China, right? But at the same time, she may not like Yoon because of anti-feminist. So for a young female, kind of dilemma, right? So, but I think seriously, what will be his policy toward China? In my view, that can be the most serious challenge in foreign policy. And as you point out, he has no experience in foreign policy. I mean, he might delegate to a great professional. But on the one hand, I mean, Mr. You know very well that China is still very important to Korea as an economic partner. There's no question. At the same time, public sentiment became much more negative against China. And then because of ongoing conflict between US and China, there are more pressure to get away from strategic ambiguity and then side with the United States. So how can you navigate through this difficult situation in dealing with China?
But my understanding, Yoon doesn't have any very strong conviction or ideas of the foreign relations. So as I mentioned before, he just like the President Chun Doo-hwan's just the delegation of authority to the expert. So, and also there are very strong resentment among the diplomats in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they even ask for get the trade issues from the Ministry of Commerce to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or something like that. So I served as advisory committee for Ministry of Foreign Affairs for several years. Then I said that if we think United States and the State Department and the Secretary is some kind of second man next to the vice president or something like that. But in Korea, even Ministry of Unification and Ministry of Education and a lot of ministries become the vice prime minister's position. But even though we are very, very some kind of influenced by the foreign relations in terms of the trade issues and some kind of geopolitical issues, foreign policies are very, very important. But still, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are some kind of lower position in the government. So they don't serve as a vice prime minister's position until now. So I strongly argue that in the Yoon's government, probably you should insist that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should be the second rank or top rank. Lee Seung-man administration and Park Chung-hee administration, especially Lee Seung-man administration, they are the number one ministry. But now their rank is very, very lower compared to other ministries. So I think that I hope the Yoon's government just to change this kind of situation, because we are very, very, at the moment, conflict between United States and China and Thucydides trap or something like that. We are very in danger. So, and also, for example, the Samsung man mentioned to me, and 93% of their, the sales are in the global sales. Domestic sales only 7%, and their total sales last year's it consists of the 14%, 14% of the Korean GDP. So the Korean trade and export and this kind of very important issue. So we have to change the government, the structures in the Yoon's administration. But I expect that surely he has a very strong stance against China because the Moon's government and the Democratic parties are very, very just skewed toward the China. But he just takes a very strong stance. But he just will leave it to the various issues to the diplomatic experts, I think. Yeah.
Dr. Lim?
Well, that's really the biggest challenge we face, I think, today. Again, so-called Eunjung Anmi, economy for China, China for economy, and security for US, US for security. That has been, that can be probably translated into strategic flexibility or strategic ambiguity. But again, as I wrote in my PowerPoint slides, all this international order is changing, and everything is pretty much fluid. And as President Yeom highlighted, we are, again, Korea is a trader. We are seventh largest trader in the world. So without the market in China, without cooperation with China, our whole economy, I don't think it can be sustainable. But at the same time, all this hub and spoke system is changing or evolving into another network, and we cannot be missed either. So, well, I don't think China versus like the US is black or white issue. But gradually or more and more increasingly, Korea is now pushed to choose either side. That's my concern too. So hopefully, as President Yeom suggested and highlighted, hopefully he can be more attentive to the experts' suggestion. Yeah, I hope so too.
So, we have so many questions, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to address all of them, but let me ask last question. It's more for your speculation. So I was comparing Korean election this time to US election in 2020. And Biden was able to lead a coalition of anti-Trump forces and won the election. And once again, I think same thing with Yoon. He was able to lead coalition of anti-Moon or anti-Democratic Party coalition. Forces, right? And then won the election. Okay, now after 1 year, Biden's rating is really bad. I think second worst after Trump. And in my own view, to be honest, Biden wasn't too exciting candidate, but still people were so desperate to beat Trump. So that's why I supported Biden. But then a lot of people got disappointed, and his rating after 1 year is pretty bad. Really bad. So 1 year after Yoon's presidency, what should we expect? Because should we be more optimistic or more pessimistic? It's more purely speculation. Then maybe we can invite you again 1 year after to see whose prediction was right. So, that was my concern, because during campaign, probably people were desperate to have regime change. But I don't think Yoon presented any clear vision for Korea's future. So people rallied around him just to beat Lee Jae-myung and regain the power back. And it happened. But then it's quite one thing to win the election, but it's quite another to run the government. So what's your expectation?
Well, yeah, it's really a speculation, and
right, yeah.
As I said before, the two different scenarios, and we hopefully just expect some kind of better way the Yoons will take, but we don't know. But at the moment, because his just political leadership, we haven't seen yet. For example, as an attorney general or the attorney, and he just like his inner circle people, he appointed most positions in his inner circle, just attorneys or something like that. So it is his weak point, and he has to just get rid of this kind of weak points, then it will be a successful government. But he still sticks to the that kind of way, his traditional style, and there's a serious and massive turmoil, political turmoil, from now on and 1 or 2 years. So some people just worrying about just selecting Assembly member Jang Jae-won as his secretary, chief secretary, then it is a very dangerous signal, because Chang is some kind of, everybody knows that he is a very controversial politician. So we don't know yet. But anyway, An Cheol-soo, if he is just leading some part of the Yoon's government, then it mitigate some kind of the weak points of the Yoon's position and style. But we don't know at all. But hopefully, because many Korean people and voters think that we have to change our political system and political just atmosphere, then Yoon understands very clearly that kind of situation, then he has to change. And I hope, that kind of thing will happen.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lim.
Well, my concern is with President Yeom too, because during the campaign, many compared Lee Jae-myung with the Lee Myung-bak, again, the corrupted, pragmatic, right? So how it's very elusive. And on the other hand, many other, again, to compare Park Geun-hye and Yoon Suk-yeol, those two are kind of, stubborn, very solid. So my suggestion, I don't think, of course, President-elect is listening to my voice, but I think many will, share the similar voices. Again, I truly hope President-elect Yoon should be communicative, should avoid the same path President Park did. Definitely, I don't want to see that any longer, because again, the President Park's problem was she was just unilateral. I mean, she was not that interactive with the media or with the people, because she thought probably she's right. So that was one big issue. So that escalated into another dimension. So again, I truly hope not professor, again, the President-elect Yoon can be more interactive with the people.
Okay, thank you so much. I've been also giving a lot of interview to Western media, and I've been quite critical. And some of my friends say, why you been, more positive? My answer was that because I care so much about Korea, so that they like to really succeed. And then I hope that we can be, cautiously optimistic about Korea's future when the election is over. So thank you so much, Dr. Yeom and Dr. Lim. It's so fascinating conversation. And also thanks to the audience for sharing so many questions. And hopefully maybe we can get together again, 6 months or a year later to reassess whether our cautious optimism prevailed or went the other way around. So thank you so much. Have a great evening and good morning in Seoul. See you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
감사합니다. 예, 수고 많으셨습니다.
감사합니다. 네.